I'm Jim Zogby, and welcome to tonight's Viewpoint. Tonight, we'll take a look at a number of topics. First, the impact of social media on current events and how social networking is influencing government policy and promoting change in the Middle East. We'll do that with Sultan Al-Qasimi. He's a U.S.-based columnist and social media commentator who covered the Arab Spring uprisings on Twitter. He was called the Sultan of Tweet. He's a fascinating character. You're going to enjoy him. But first, I want to welcome back to the show His Royal Highness Prince Turki Al Faisal. He's chairman of the King Faisal Center for Research and Islamic Studies, former Director General of Saudi Arabia's intelligence agency, and served for a time here as ambassador to Washington and to the United Kingdom. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Jim.
You had an op-ed in the New York Times basically saying pretty much what you said in your Washington Post op-ed a short while back. But this one created an uproar. I want to ask you, before we get into the content of it and the themes of it, why the hysteria over this resolution at the UN? It was about the Palestinian resolution and what the reaction was going to be in the United States and what the reaction would be in the world if the U.S. vetoed. Have you been able to discern in your time here why the U.S. is so hysterical about this resolution?
Really, it's a mystery to me, Jim, because after all, the United Nations Security Council and General Assembly created the State of Israel back in 1947-48. Why should there be a hysteria about Palestine being created by United Nations Security Council and General Assembly resolution is a mystery. It doesn't compute. And this is, I think, the measure of where people are at this moment. People are in a deficit about what to do about Palestine. And the fact that the Palestinian people want a state is recognized by everybody, including the United States. After all, it was President Obama last year who said at the General Assembly meeting in New York that he's looking forward to the establishment of a Palestinian state. What better way to do it than through the channel of the United Nations?
One of the things you write in the article is that if the U.S. does veto, that there will be repercussions. American influence will decline. And you say that Saudi Arabia will not be able to cooperate with the U.S. as it has in the past. That's what created some shockwaves here. Some folks are concerned about that. An idle threat, or what would exactly the nature of the lack of cooperation be?
Let me start by saying that I'm expressing my personal opinion. I'm not a representative of the Saudi government, but I do express what is generally felt and talked about in our part of the world. The U.S., since President Obama's speech in Cairo in 2009, has not done anything in the Middle East. Basically, it has ceded the leadership role in providing a strategy for establishing peace in the Middle East. And it is from that vantage point that I expressed my views, not only in this op-ed, but in the previous one in the Washington Post.
What do you think? What would the nature of a Saudi lack of cooperation be with the United States? How would one transform the relationship from where it is today?
Well, I gave examples in my op-ed on the issue of Bahrain, for example. We saw it as a need for not only Saudi Arabia, for the GCC countries also, to cooperate in helping Bahrain overcome what was admittedly a very troublesome and very awkward and very complicated situation in Bahrain. But you need to have stability in a place like Bahrain in order for civil issues to be resolved through negotiations. And people have called the Saudi and Emirati decision to send troops into Bahrain as being an invasion, as participating in quelling disturbances in Bahrain. None of that happened. These forces that went into Bahrain went to protect very strategic places in Bahrain, like the airport, the seaport, the oil refinery, and government buildings in Bahrain. They had absolutely no role to play in how the Bahraini people were engaged in their struggle for whatever rights or issues they have with their government. So it's a one situation where the public view, if you like, in the media of that situation is contrary to what was happening on the ground.
So Saudi Arabia will act on its own to defend its interests and not defer to the United States. That's one of the consequences here?
Well, I think this is par for the course for any country. The U.S. took a position that these forces should not have gone into Bahrain. But we thought that for our own interest and for stability in the area, that we must lend a hand to the government in Bahrain.
Let's talk a little about Bahrain here. Did the government in Bahrain miss an opportunity to begin the national dialogue with the opposition? Did they wait too long to move on that track, or was there no acceptance of a national dialogue from the opposition?
There was, I think, on both sides missteps taken. On the side of the government, what is important is what they're doing now. They have established the principle that they want to negotiate with the opposition. They have set up an independent commission headed by a very eminent jurist from the Islamic world and with totally independent purview to look at what happened over the disturbances that happened in February and in March. And that commission is doing its work. And the king has said in Bahrain that he will abide by whatever conclusions this commission reaches on that. So I think they should be given a chance to do that.
There were two views. One was that it was a majority Shia community that was being discriminated against. And the other view was that there was an Iranian interference in the country and a fear that Iran was exploiting this and destabilizing the country. Weigh both circumstances for me.
Well, let me start by this Iranian influence or disturbance in the area. People were saying to us after the GCC decision to send forces into Bahrain that there is no evidence of Iranian interference in Bahrain. What I tell them is you have to look back to 1979 when the Iranian Revolution took place and Khomeini came to power. Iranian intervention in not only in Bahrain but in Iraq, in Saudi Arabia and other Muslim communities began then. If you're looking for a smoking gun, you can find a smoking cannon back in 1979 and going on from there. So it was in response to that the kingdom and the GCC countries decided to lend a hand to the Bahraini government.
We have a conflict to your south as well,
yes,
and that is in Yemen, which is one we've talked about on the show, and it's not a simple one. It's not two parties. It's multiple parties, and it's overlaying. It's a series of layers of problems. It's tribal. It's regional. It's within the family, within the tribe itself, the governing family, etc. Saudi Arabia has the president of Yemen in the country. He keeps talking about going back. He hasn't gone back. He's made some moves in recent days to have some kind of transition commission. What are the dangers in Yemen for Saudi Arabia, and what do you think is going to be the next step as we move forward?
Well, the dangers are not only to Saudi Arabia. I think they are to the world community. We've seen examples of that last year when Saudi Arabia tipped off the security organizations in the US and in other countries about parcel bombs that were being sent on aircraft to be exploded in the United States. And Saudi Arabia was the one that informed everybody of that. So the danger of that is worldwide. It's not just to Saudi Arabia. Yemen has had a long history of rebellion and disturbances for many years. The kingdom has worked very hard to try to help in alleviating some of the challenges that meet the people of the Yemen through economic aid, through security aid, through exchange of information, etc. And Saudi Arabia and the other GCC countries proposed a timetable and a roadmap, if you like, for achieving stability in Yemen. The president on and off, agreed and disagreed and accepted and did not accept that proposition. But in the last few days, he delegated his vice president to carry forward the GCC plan. And I hope that the other parties in Yemen will accept that.
Is it stabilizable? Is it a conflict that's gone too far out of control? I mean, one argued in the past that that President Ali Saleh controlled Sana'a at times of the day, that it really wasn't a broad national presence. But in fact, it was a more or less stable situation. Problems erupting in the north, some problems in the south. But nevertheless, what's happened today is a situation very much out of control. Can it be brought back under control?
Well, I hope so. I hope the people of Yemen can do that. Whatever solutions for the Yemen have to come from within the Yemen. There are opposition parties that have views. There is a government represented by President Saleh that also represents certain views. And the GCC proposition tried to bring together these two, in some cases, contradictory positions in a way that could help the Yemeni people get over this challenge of who represents them, what kind of government they have, etc. And the kingdom has been working very closely with the world community and with the GCC to try to help the Yemeni people achieve peace and security.
Let me shift to the north, and that's to Syria. The king had some tough words for the government. The GCC has now echoed those words. The Arab League has taken a different tack, trying to create some sort of negotiation. Is the government reformable? Can they be a party to a reform process, or do you think that they've gone the step too far?
I don't know. I'm not in a position to know the intricacies of the developments in Syria.
Did their behavior surprise you?
Very much so. I think when President Bashar al-Assad came to power, succeeding his father 10 years ago nearly, he came with a lot of goodwill on the part of people that he will do the right thing, if you like, by the Syrian people. But as we saw in the developments in Lebanon, for example, it took the president from 2000 or 1999, when he succeeded his father, until 2005 for him to withdraw Syrian forces from Lebanon. And it took the killing of a prime minister in Lebanon to do that. I hope that the president of Syria now appreciates that the continued killing of Syrian people is not going to solve his problem, that he has to solve them in meeting what these people want, which is basically a stable and a progressive and a workable solution for them.
Has he become a pariah in the region? I mean, you now have GCC countries speaking out against him, other Arab countries. The Arab League had a resolution that wasn't as you know, by any measure as tough as some would have expected or wanted, but nevertheless, he has never been as isolated. For the person who saw himself carrying the banner of Arab nationalism, he's lost many of his allies in the region.
He did, and the unfortunate thing, of course, is that the Syrian people are paying the price. That has to stop. Using Syrian forces to kill Syrian citizens is not acceptable under any circumstances.
Were you surprised by Iraq's involvement in this?
Not really. I think Iraq has fallen under the sway of Iran. And this was very clear after the removal of Saddam Hussein from power through the American intervention back in 2003. And Iraq now is doing the bidding of Iran, because Iran was a close ally of Syria and remains a close ally of Syria. But even Iran today is calling on President Bashar al-Assad to negotiate with his people. And I think he should heed that call.
Talk to me about Iraq, because the U.S. is going to be leaving. They're leaving a residual force simply to do training. Are there worries about the future of the country?
Very much so. And what I have been proposing over the last few years is that there should be a United Nations Security Council resolution that declares Iraq's territorial integrity as an imperative rather than as a choice. And that has not happened. And without that, I think there are centrifugal forces in Iraq that may lead to the disintegration of Iraq and its breaking up into various parcels. And that is not acceptable in the area. That will merely draw neighbors into the area and